Oh, but this chocolate soy milk is amazing. Oh.
Hello and welcome to another episode of SyrupCast. My name is Daniel Bader, and I am joined this week and most weeks by the lovely, behatted Douglas Soltis. How are you?
Behatted this week and most weeks.
And most weeks. Not recently, though. You've been showing off your suave haircut.
Can't hat all the time.
Swag haircut.
Also, it's 1,000 bazillion degrees outside.
It's so hot, and yet you wore a cardigan to the office yesterday.
Yeah,
because
that was a bad
you need
call.
to be cooler than everybody else.
No, it's because in the morning, I don't think it's going to be as hot as it becomes. Plus,
it's literally
the
summer
colors.
still.
Yeah, I know.
So we're going to forego our usual sports-based pleasantries, unless you want to talk about tennis with me.
No, but how about Canada dominating Argentina last night at the FIBAs?
I
like a bazillion points.
I don't know anything about that game.
Tell
me about that game.
I think Andrew Wiggins ripped off someone's face with a dunk. Just dunked it right off.
Oh, that's such a good face.
Yeah. Face dunking is the future.
So what, explain the FIBAs. So is it like under a certain age, or is it like...
No, the FIBA is like the big International Basketball Commission. And the FIBA stuff it's in Mexico, and it's a big warm up to the Olympic qualifications.
Right.
Or this is part of the Olympic qualifications. So I'm not sure if the U.S. is there because having won the Olympics, I don't know if they need to be.
They often just get a pass, I think, because they're better than everybody.
Well, last year's winners don't have to do as many qualifying events, but Canada is there fighting against a bunch of other North American countries to stake their claim as a Canadian competitor for the Olympics. So it's like we're missing like Tristan Thompson, but Andrew Wiggins and Corey Joseph are on the team, as well as a bunch of people who played at the Pan Ams, and they're doing pretty okay.
So how many Canadians are in the NBA?
Like 10.
That's pretty good. I would say that's probably better than it was 10 years ago.
Holy crap. Yeah, it was just Steve Nash, man. And guy used to play for the Sixers.
Allen Iverson.
Yeah, him. Philly.
I miss Iverson.
Yeah.
He was like the John McEnroe of basketball players.
If we told Iverson stories on this pod, it would have to be an After Dark pod. But yeah, it's an explosion. You can like field an entire team now with just Canadian players, and it would be dope. So this is what Steve Nash and Vince Carter hath wrought in our country, because all these kids are like 10 years younger than us and can jump twice as high.
That's amazing. I came across a 3-point tournament on the Esplanade a few weeks ago, and it was awesome. It was, big guys look like they play pretty well, and then like 5-year-olds basically just like trying to get it in the hoop and loving it. It was amazing. It was like a community event, the Esplanade Basketball Association or something, I want to say, but it was beautiful to watch.
Please tell me it was called Getting It in the Hoop and Loving It, because that is a great for like a community.
What's the acronym
sports.
for that?
Someone in the comments, please just do that for us.
Please make that happen. So let's start. We've now gotten 5 minutes into this, and not a word of anything mobile has been spoken.
Yeah, that's the test. That's what you guys have to put up with if you want the glorious pod delivered to you once a week.
I picture people like putting on the pod while they're doing their dishes, and like for the first while they're like they have this really hard pan that they need to scrub, so they scrub really hard, and the ones that don't really care about the first few minutes, the sports podcast stuff, they'll just like scrub really hard and just like get really into it. And then when they're done with that, then they'll start, gingerly washing the plates, cutlery, paying attention. That's how I think about it.
Are you saying that we need more hot takes or less?
Oh, I could do another podcast with you just on non-mobile related hot takes.
Hot takes. I don't think that Brooklyn pizza is very good.
Ooh, north of Brooklyn, you mean?
Whatever. Any of the Brooklyns.
but that's really getting like local. Like nobody will really know about that.
Toronto is all of Canada. We're just going to talk
Shout
about
out
stuff.
Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah, sure.
So
what's good?
BlackBerry did something this morning. They bought a competitor for $445 million.
It's a lot of millions.
And they bought the competitor after having publicly sparred with them, as many competitors do. And we'll talk about that in a second. So they acquired this company for, $425 million in cash. And a lot of people didn't really, if they haven't been paying attention to BlackBerry, they may have thought that the company was a little bit less flush than it actually is. But they had about $3 billion in cash lying around that they've been hoarding for a few years.
Yeah, they have cash.
And this was their biggest acquisition since 2010 when they bought QNX. And as you know, QNX was the foundation for the playbook, for BlackBerry 10, and for a lot of the connected car solutions that you see today. QNX is a very powerful platform. Good is also a very powerful platform, heavily iOS focused. So they did a survey of their 6,000 customers in August. I was just reading this, and 71% of those customers connect to Good's services and network through iOS. Mm-hmm. But that's diminishing. So iOS used to be much higher for them. Android is now improving, and so is Windows. So interesting stats, but Good is about as far from sort of BlackBerry's customer base in terms of hardware as anybody could get. So this is a really interesting acquisition for them because they do many of the same things: device management, containerization, auto billing. Mm-hmm. These kinds of like de facto, if I need to deploy thousands of devices to my workforce and control them from one centralized location, here's a solution for that. So it's really interesting. But I mean, you worked at BlackBerry. You may have an interesting take on this.
Well, so prior to even working at BlackBerry, I've been covering kind of like Good as a BlackBerry competitor since like 2004, 2005, right? And if you want to see something hilarious, readers, go to Inside BlackBerry, do a search for Good, see the most recent announcement, and then scroll down just a little bit to see some of the other posts that BlackBerry deemed it worthy enough to write on Good. So I think it's pretty fair to say that not only have they been competitors, they've been somewhat nemeses for the past 10 years for a lot of obvious reasons in terms of producing similar products, and then some behind the scene reasons, which I will not speak about on this podcast. But so this is an interesting acquisition because you're right. It is the biggest thing. Most of the companies that BlackBerry has acquired under Chen's tenure have been small companies that provide very specific service that kind of fills a gap in their portfolio. Whereas with Good, there is an overlap in the portfolio. So when you have a situation like that, one of the obvious things you're doing, you're buying customers, you're buying market share, you're buying a base for which you can sell your services in your portfolio. You're obviously buying a bunch of development talent with experience in that. And there might be some opportunities with, if it's a not complete overlap, taking some of their services and packaging them. So I haven't fully gone through the executive Q&A between Marty Beard and Christy Wyatt that they have explaining this. But generally when you have this kind of acquisition, that's, it's a great way for BlackBerry to really own this market and its revenue.
And we have to say that as of recording, this happened like less than an hour ago. So
totes.
We don't have all of the details. But what's interesting is on Wikipedia, there's a list of acquisitions made by BlackBerry, and they're up to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22 acquisitions throughout its life. And the first 7, so of the first 7, 6 of them were Canadian companies. They acquired companies that you may have remembered from the Java-based BlackBerry days, like Torch Mobile. Obviously, they used that to create the WebKit browser in BB7.
Plasmic.
Vigo, which they used to integrate sort of like a news aggregation RSS platform. Chalk Media, they acquired Dash Navigation for their GPS stuff. They acquired Documents to Go, if you remember. That's how they started bundling a lot of those productivity services. And then over the course of the last 5 years, they haven't acquired a single Canadian company. They acquired Scoreloop for social gaming in 2011. Ubitex, which was a competitor to Good. They acquired that for an undisclosed amount, but it was a much smaller company. JCut, a video editing suite. Nubay, which was a content provider they paid $100 million for outside from Ireland. I don't remember that. What was that?
Well, it was part of the disaster of BlackBerry trying to be a total ecosystem. So
fair enough.
Yeah, that one was. I can't actually comment too much on that. That was still under my tenure.
So then we start getting into the more interesting ones. Paratech they bought in 2012. And they started integrating the antenna and multi-band RF technology Paratech owned into their handsets. So the Z30, which was BlackBerry's biggest device to date when it debuted in 2013, had this really interesting microphone setup where if your mouth was far away from the regular mic, it would start picking up your and transferring your voice to the headpiece mic. Like if say you somehow, like if you were lying down and your mouth wasn't close to the main microphone, it would automatically adjust its gain on the other mics in the phone and make you sound just as good as you would if you were talking normally. It's really an amazing technology, and they've integrated it into a bunch of other phones since then.
It's the phone in your hand versus phone on the table for a conference call scenario, right?
Correct. Yeah. So
BlackBerry was the last mobile company to care about call quality.
Well, and we'll get back to that because we're going to talk a bit about platforms and chat platforms later in the show. But, sorry. But what's interesting about that is that I think the phone call is making a bit of a comeback, but not in the way that you think. So we'll talk about that a bit later. Then they acquired SecuSmart, which was a German company focused on voice and data encryption. Chancellor Merkel, reportedly uses the service to encrypt her phone that the U.S. broke into anyway. MoVirtue, a virtual SIM solution. We talked about that on a previous podcast. This is really interesting. It allows companies to deploy multiple numbers with a single SIM card using basically software. And Watchdocs, which was an Israeli company that we don't really know too much about, but it was earlier this year, an enterprise data sync and share solution. So it's basically a cloud Dropbox competitor, but for enterprise companies.
Yeah. So these companies now are the companies acquired mostly under Chen's tenure that relate to filling in the gaps of the security portfolio. So if readers want to go check out the last write-up I did on their BlackBerry Security Summit, which was like 2 months back, these were the companies that were there speaking about security and security, but then also like data portability, like the dual SIM software as a work play solution as well.
So finally, and we won't linger on this too much, ad hoc. And I love this idea. I love ad hoc. Ad hoc is basically a crisis management solution. So in earthquakes, hurricanes, this company allows people to get in touch very quickly using a number of automated ways. So in a sense, they make you reachable in times where you may not be reachable.
And they make information. Yeah. So between government agencies or emergency scenarios like this. So it's like BlackBerry bought a company to replicate and enhance what happened during 9/11, where their devices were the only devices that could communicate based upon some old network tech that they could support through pin-to-pin messaging.
Right.
Which
this isn't that. I mean, this is IP based, but this is more broadcast. So ad hoc will allow people to broadcast messages, sort of like the way that we get Amber Alerts on our phones. So they have that similar thing set up within the ecosystem. So if your company subscribes to it, you know, if you're the administrator, you're the network emergency contact, you can blast out where to meet. You know, in case there's a reason to congregate somewhere. So a lot of really interesting strategic acquisitions by BlackBerry, and this one kind of tops them all off because Good has its own ecosystem, right? It has a ton of apps that support Good. I know a lot of people whose companies use it, and you know, they've often talked about switching over to Bez, but Bez has been a bit expensive, and this is just another way to solve that problem. Well, it'll be interesting to see how BlackBerry integrates Good, or whether they keep them independent, at least for the time being.
I think this is one of those scenarios where it's in BlackBerry's best interest to rip them to shreds and sell their product. Like, you know, BlackBerry is not big enough that they can be fine with brand dilution in a way that, say, Facebook buying Instagram is fine. Especially in an enterprise scenario, I don't think it's entirely necessary. And if you're buying their customers, you know, you just make it could be Good powered by BlackBerry or something like that, but it'll have a BlackBerry such and such suite, or BlackBerry, you know, like the company's typical naming system. Eventually, I don't see Good living as a corporate identity for too long.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that BlackBerry promised about $500 million in software-based revenue. Chen, rather, promised this by the end of fiscal 2016. And the fact that Good makes its money entirely on software is an important step to getting there.
Yeah. Buying it is one way to do it. Buying revenue is one way to get revenue.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of a long-term play, but obviously I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that if BlackBerry decides to get out of making BB10 based devices and moving to Android, and we've spoken about this before, you know, there's no question that the Venice slider is real. We've seen real world leaks now, not just renders. We've seen you know, short promo videos they've done for it. I mean, this phone is coming. Whether, you know, it is successful or not is besides the point, but BlackBerry is going to market the hell out of it. And having a really robust Android-based MDM company in its stable is actually quite useful for them.
Yeah, well, but like I said, the counter argument, or part of it though, is that you could say that with they already had the MDM solution for Android with the Bez 12 stuff, right? Because it can manage Android and iPhone as well as it can BlackBerry 10. But yes, like I guess if you're right, as if the, you know, the control of a BlackBerry 10 device has always been higher than, say, an Android or an iOS device. So if they go more into Android, owning all these Android specific security services might give them like a similar advantage.
Yeah, and I don't think Chen cares where, now that they own Good, or when they own Good, I don't think Chen cares you know, which company you get your service from, as long as the revenue is going into his pocket.
Yes, totally. And that's why I think that this is, you know, we listed off those imperatives. It's they're buying revenue. They're buying a customer base.
But they're also buying long-term stability, because the more competitors they can take out, I mean, this is basically like Just Eat buying all of its competitors in every local market, right? Totally. BlackBerry has strengths in certain regions, and Good has strengths in a lot of regions that BlackBerry doesn't. So I think that especially in the US, where Bez isn't as big as it could be, especially among corporations, I know that they have a pretty good business. They have a pretty good government penetration, but in terms of companies themselves, I think Good still has a lot more. They have a lot more trust and a lot more of a compelling product, especially in terms of mobile. So this is just what I'm hearing.
Totally. No. Yeah. I think you're totally right. I think it allows BlackBerry to accelerate its software sales goals beyond what it could do just building up its own. Like, you know, like at the security summit, we were just talking about this. Like, they were just at the point where, like, hey, we've built this portfolio of things. Now we have to figure out how to sell it. Well, you know, the clock is running. You know, if you have what, like 2 billion in the bank, and you can spend an eighth of that to buy a company already selling through and put that on your ledger, cool. That is a smart and aggressive and a super Chen move.
Super Chen.
Yeah.
He is kind of a superhero, actually.
Well, I wouldn't.
In terms of his honesty and his, you know, he's so forthcoming about the company's strengths and weaknesses.
He is very direct about what's going on, but I think you'll actually probably see that change. So, like, when Chen comes in, he's in a position where everyone knows exactly what's wrong with BlackBerry, or they know that things are wrong with BlackBerry, but they don't know to what extent. For Chen to have any credibility, he's got to come in and say, "Listen, I've looked at the books. This is what's going on. Investment community, customers, you know me, you know what I've done before. Trust me. This is what we're going to do," because it's been a very long time since anyone's looked at BlackBerry's leadership with anything other than contempt, right? So he was forced to be as honest as possible so that they would trust him, that he was actually serious about turning things around. I think as BlackBerry gets more develops a greater position of strength, he's going to button up the vest in terms of future plans and what's going on, because being as honest as he's been would be a competitive disadvantage.
Well, no, I don't think that's true. I don't think he discloses anything that he doesn't need to, or you know, that he shouldn't. I think that given BlackBerry's, you know, very Canadian nature, and by Canadian I mean it's considered a very boring company from the consumer perspective these days. The fact that he gets in the press so often by making statements that the press loves. He's unpredictable. He goes off script. He's a bit like, you know, it's sort of like the rise of the celebrity CEO, and he's about as celebrity a CEO as an enterprise company can get. And the reason that people love talking about him is, you know, sort of the only way that they get to talk about BlackBerry in like, I remember I read a thing on Recode the other day where John Chen spoke to Ina Fried about handsets. You know, everybody loves to hate on BlackBerry's handset business, but at the same time, for a company with such a tiny market share, I mean, less than 1% worldwide now, they get talked about from a handset perspective so much more than, say, a ZTE or I mean, obviously ZTE is a Chinese-based company, but I mean, we're talking about brand recognition here.
Yeah.
So he does a lot to stoke the fires of BlackBerry's consumer business, even though it's such a minute part of its overall sales goal. And he does that knowing that we're just going to jump all over it, and people love talking about BlackBerries. I mean, everybody who I've spoken to about this Venice slider is excited about it, even though they don't know why. They don't know why they want a BlackBerry with a keyboard with running Android. They're just like, I think I love it, and I think I want one.
But it's because BlackBerry's the only company making phones that are different from any other phone. Like, we talked about this with the Passport. It's like, hey, remember in the late 2000s when every company had a different take on what a phone should be? Like, BlackBerry's the last company with a different take on what a phone should be. So yeah, and we've talked about, you know, Chen is very, very smart about waving a phone in people's face to then talk about security and software. I'm just saying that, like, as that becomes less of a necessity, you'll probably see Chen do that less, or he'll most certainly continue to go off script and be a maverick or whatever that BS narrative is. But in terms of being super upfront about the company's capabilities, what it can and what it can't do. You know, like he's been very honest, like, I'm not sure we can do this stuff anymore. I still need to find out if we can make money in these markets, things like that. I think those types of statements you'll see.
But he owns it. I mean, what I think is so interesting about it is that he owns it. He takes personal responsibility for it, the way that a lot of people, you know, don't. As CEOs, they defer. They say, you know, the enterprise, the company is doing this. The company's doing that. Chen goes, I am going to be in the handset business as long as I can make money. I'm going to make strategic acquisitions if they make sense for BlackBerry in the long term. Even though we know that Chen, he is looking to sell the company if that's necessary, that he is looking to lay people off if that's necessary. I mean, he personally takes the responsibility because as a CEO should, he is the person who lives and dies by the company's decisions.
No, I hear you, and that's a strong observation, and I think that there's even more to that as well, with not only just his performance as a leader and, like, you know, what it means to do those things, but then also the reasons for why maybe he came to that company.
Right? Absolutely, and I mean the fact that he's always
bringing come back like Jordan wearing the 4.5. It's not to play games with you; it's to aim at you, probably maim you. I'm blowing you to smithereens. I can't say the rest of the rap. Just Jay-Z, you know, like Michael Jordan coming back for the Wizards, being like, I already did this at other companies. I'm like older now. I don't really want to retire. Can I make BlackBerry work again? Wow, if I did that, that would be pretty badass. Also, let me hire in all my former executive team and help get them paid.
Except the interesting part is that because, like, Jordan's a business, right? Michael Jordan is a business, and this is a bit of an aside, but he just won a lawsuit against a small U.S.-based grocery chain for using his likeness and his name to in one of their what was it, coupon books or brochures or weekly specials pamphlets. And he won for, and he got $9 million out of this grocery chain. I think it was Safeway. And the reason that he won was because he is a brand, he is a likeness, and similarly to, you know, BlackBerry's keyboard, you know, they won against Typo because there's no other company doing what BlackBerry does.
Well, no, they won against Typo because they have a legitimate case and mountains of patents related to keyboards. And Typo basically sold themselves as being a BlackBerry keyboard you could slide onto your iPhone, right?
Right. No, I know that. But I mean, there's FRAND, and then there's, you know, copyright infringement, and there's patent infringement. And the expectation, and I'm not a patent lawyer, disclaimer, but from what I understood about that is it wasn't just about the patents. It was about, because the Typo keyboard was a piece of crap. I mean, it wasn't a matter of Typo ripping off BlackBerry's keyboard and having it work just as well. This was a design ripoff. This was Typo going,
they're going after
I'm going to make a keyboard that looks exactly like the BlackBerry keyboard. And BlackBerry goes, there's no way that this would ever be construed as a BlackBerry or mistaken for a BlackBerry keyboard because it's a piece of crap.
Yeah, you're devaluing our brand by even, like,
totally. And it's the same thing, right? Like, no, Michael Jordan needs to go out and attack, even though I may not agree with how viciously he does it.
Well, it's vicious, or like you have a legal obligation, right? Because if you don't defend yourself against IP or property theft, that can actually hurt you in future cases where you really want to do it. Yeah, like that, and that's something that I learned at BlackBerry. It's like, if someone's using your brand, your trademark brand, in a way that they're not supposed to be, and you don't go after them for it, you create a scenario where you have been demonstrably not protecting that, and it can weaken your case in future instances. But I think the more interesting question is, like, whose brand is better right now, BlackBerry's or Chen's?
Who?
Which is a more respected brand?
And say it's the other, you know, the ancillary question to that is, should they be interchangeable? Does Chen represent BlackBerry, or when he goes out, does he represent himself? And I mean, obviously he represents BlackBerry officially, but is Chen should Chen decide to sell off BlackBerry to somebody else and go save yet another company, will he? Is there any soul in the relationship? Is he invested in BlackBerry as a company, or did he just come in as a fixer and then he's basically going to try to do this all over again in a couple of years?
Oh, don't get fired, Douglas. So I would say that let's just put it this way. The context and the scenario through which Chen became the CEO of this company dictates that Chen and BlackBerry are not as interchangeable as, say, Elon Musk is with Tesla or Steve Jobs was with Apple, simply because it wasn't his baby, right?
Totally.
He's a Merck CEO brought in to fix things, and that's not like a flaw or a problem. That's just like how things go. It's
He's Sean Penn in 90% of the movies that Sean Penn has been in.
I would say I was going to say Kevin Bacon, but you're Sean Penn. That's a very interesting.
I trust Sean Penn far more than Kevin Bacon.
Well, yeah, I know that's what I'm saying. But I would say he's more like whatever token British actor. He's like Ben Kingsley. You want to class up this picture? Bring in Ben Kingsley.
Class it up. I would say that he's more like Jason Statham, where he comes in and just kills a bunch of like random, like nondescript.
Go see Spy just to see Jason Statham rip off one-liners and just take over that movie.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
It's really rented. It's got to be on demand by now. It's just watch the Statham stuff.
Okay, so let's move on.
We have a BlackBerry question though. Do we want to answer this question from Mike Atrell? What's up, Mike Atrell?
Yo, so actually let's introduce Mike. So Mike is our own Rob Atrell's or Atrell's. I apologize if I messed it up. You can correct me. Cousin. I believe Mike lives in Calgary. At blah. No, I'm just joking. I don't know your address. And he podcasts with our own Rob. Who writes for us occasionally. Rob just got married and is putting out an amazing article today on his iPhone 6 photo experience in Hawaii, where he went on honeymoon. So Mike and Rob have a bunch of podcasts whose names I embarrassingly don't know offhand. But one is, I think one's called Autowatt. No, Mike doesn't do that one.
Just Google it. It's on the internet, guys.
I would Google it, but every time I Google,
listeners, not you, they should Google it. They can find it.
They should Google it. Yeah. But every time I do something on my computer while I podcast, it messes it up. So I don't want to do anything. That said, we'll read the question now, if you haven't already tuned out. Would people be more accepting of BB devices, BlackBerry devices, if they were purchased by an Asian company like Huawei, then marketed under the Huawei name, but using the same hardware or software? People's knee-jerk reactions, my own included, not me, Mike's, seem to detract from from the products. I think that every company has these sort of built-in biases, and I don't think that would change with Huawei buying BlackBerry or any other company buying BlackBerry. I think BlackBerry is perceived very differently in Canada than it is anywhere else in the world.
Oh yeah,
we still have a very patriotic Future Chat. Sorry, Future Chat. That's what you talk. So look up Future Chat. I think that Huawei, I mean, like we heard about Lenovo thinking of buying BlackBerry. I know that there were actual talks happening and it wasn't just fluff. I know that the Canadian government never would have let Lenovo buy BlackBerry. And I don't think any Asian company would ever be allowed to buy BlackBerry. But
just think but keep with Lenovo and Lenovo and Motorola and the fact that the Motorola brand remains the same. And I think
I think that BlackBerry has cachet. And I think John Chen has done a good job refarming some of the good feeling towards BlackBerry. But the thing is, the good feeling towards BlackBerry is in the enterprise space, and that doesn't really apply to the consumer space very much. And people who used to use their Curve 8100s, or Pearl 8100s, Curve 8300s, Bolds, whatever, they have a very personal connection to them. And many people on the consumer side remember when, it was just BBM that got them through the day.
Mhm.
But if they were to go back to that today, they would not have the same experience.
No, because the
So,
game doesn't change. But I would say that
yeah.
it's not necessarily a knee-jerk reaction. It's more of a Malcolm Gladwell blink reaction, where all these experiences kind of soak up into one thin slice perception of a company, right? No one knee-jerks about BlackBerry anymore because BlackBerry's not doing things for them to react to. It's more of that history that Daniel just so eloquently talked about being carried with them in all future impressions. So for another company to buy that brand and just slap a new name on it, I think you're mitigating what Daniel was talking about before with Chen be able to getting a lot of conversation about a company that only owns 1% of the market share, but you're not getting any benefit from it. So I would think that even if they were acquired, someone would keep the BlackBerry brand. Hell, there's like Nokia is going after, like, the Nokia brand still exists and it's not even the same Nokia, right? So there's
But I mean,
equity in
think about it
BlackBerry.
like this: if Cisco today went out and bought, Juniper Systems, or they went out and bought some other MDM solution like SODI, there's a company based in Mississauga called SODI. They do MDM. They're pretty well known. They're doing a good job. If Cisco bought SODI, would The Verge report on it? Would CNET report on it? Would we report on it?
Unless Taylor Swift writes an album about it, it's not going on The Verge. But
so, I mean, that's the thing, is that all those sites, including us, reported on this acquisition of BlackBerry.
And no, but if IBM and Cisco like decided to fight to a death in a Thunderdome, The Verge would write about it. I think, but that's the difference. It's like, BlackBerry, for as much as it's moving out of it, still has its toe in the consumer world. And this is kind of why in this scenario that, like, if BlackBerry was to rip up Good's brand and just absorb it in, no one's going to really care, because in the enterprise space, everyone's going to know that, like, oh, BlackBerry owns Good now, but it's the same thing or whatever. There's no broad facing equity there. Whereas in the consumer space, people, like, companies year after year spend millions of dollars to make sure that when you hear a brand name from Taco Bell to Doritos, that you have the right knee-jerk association with it. Because it's very hard to get in front of people and get them to care about things or to have a reaction to things. So that I think that's why in the consumer space, you see these brands remaining even if they haven't been delivering.
Absolutely.
Shout out Joel Rushworth drinking coffee on the West Coast. Left Coast, I like that. The sinister coast.
Let's move on a bit. Let's talk some consumer tech. This week is IFA in Berlin. It's that time of the year where all of the phones get announced. But this year has been a little bit quieter on the phone front, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But a lot of it has to do with smartwatches. So Samsung announced its Note 5 and Galaxy S6 Edge Plus Pro Sunshine last month, and they released it at the end of the month. And that was to give a bit more runway to its wearable this month, and that was the Gear S2. And a lot of people dismiss Samsung's previous smartwatches for good reason, because they were mostly just bad. But this smartwatch actually has a lot going for it. So it's a round smartwatch. It runs Tizen, which is Samsung's sort of, not, they don't own it, but they have
Hard
a very
pass.
large stake in it. And Tizen actually has improved a lot over the past few years. And this one looks particularly good. But what's really interesting about it is that they decided not to go garish. They decided to do what they did with the S6, simplifying, slimming down, making sure that the fundamentals are there. And what's really interesting is that it has a rotating bezel that is used to navigate through the UI. Now, obviously, the similarities to the digital crown on the Apple Watch are there, but it's not a ripoff of the digital crown. And from what I've seen, although I haven't actually used the smartwatch, it could actually be a better input mechanism than the digital crown, even though I think it looks a little bit more garish in the sense that it surrounds the bezel of the smartwatch, and as a result, it adds to its size a little, but not too much. I'm looking forward to trying it, and I think that if they get the developer support that they claim, 1,000 developers are on board with 1,000 apps, 100 made in conjunction with Samsung, so more more solutions specifically for the watch. If they can continue that, then they have the potential to do quite well. Unfortunately, as we know with Samsung's quote unquote app ecosystem, they haven't really done a great job in the past keeping developers interested. So they'll announce something with a bunch of developer support, and then if it's not specifically made for Android, it'll just peter out.
Yeah.
Now that has the potential here, but the thing is that the Gear S2 has Android compatibility now. It's not just compatible with Samsung devices. So any Android phone running Android 4.4 KitKat or above with 1.5 gigs of RAM minimum gets to use the Samsung Gear S2. So who knows? It could be good. We don't know pricing yet. We don't know when it's coming specifically. We do know that it's coming to Canada in October, which is a little bit later than it did than the Moto 360 and the Huawei watch and a bunch of other watches that were announced. But those were Android Wear watches. So why buy an Android Wear watch today? Well, it now has iPhone compatibility. It's now a lot faster. It's now a lot more
one that developers
intuitive.
are actually going to make apps for.
And the developers creating Android apps don't really have to do a whole lot to add Wear compatibility. So that's a big deal. But Android Wear is still not very good. I mean, it's useful in some cases, but it's just not a very robust smartwatch OS just yet. It's not very attractive. The Google Now cards come and go as they please. And there doesn't seem to be anything sort of keeping people interested in it in the long term, other than as a notification hub.
Yeah.
So who knows? But maybe that's what the smartwatch will just end up being, right? I mean,
then no one's gonna in a world in which tablet sales are flat or declining, and a tablet can actually be a useful device because people don't necessarily need it because of their laptop, big phone portfolio. For a smartwatch to just be notification triage, it will never catch on. We're still at the point where you need a reason to own a smartwatch, and especially if it's a smartwatch that doesn't run any Android apps. Android developers have a hard enough time being Android developers. Are they really going to go port their app over for just Samsung's slew of devices? How amazing of a smartwatch would this have to be for an Android developer to be like, well, we really got to get on that hot new Samsung device, rather than clicking a button and deploying to all the Android Wear devices, which still haven't even proven to be viable. For as much as people have been lamenting Apple Watch sales and how it's a quote unquote failure, it's still taken two out of every 3 smartwatches sold are an Apple Watch right now.
Well, I think it was ComScore or Gartner just put out a report saying that Apple Watch now comprises 20% of the wearables market, and that's after 1 quarter. But they lump Fitbit in with the wearables, obviously. So Apple Watch is more expensive, it does more, and not everybody has an iPhone, whereas Fitbit is compatible with Android, iOS, Windows Phone, not BlackBerry. And they have a much more well-known brand when it comes to fitness tracking. So I don't know if it's fair to lump it in with the Fitbits and Garmin's in them, but it's a very nice stat. We don't know how well the new Android Wear devices are going to do. The first generation devices were very first gen, right? The Moto 360 was nice, but it didn't perform well. Its battery was crap. The first couple Android Wear devices from LG and Samsung were just bad. I mean, the G Watch was basically a technology demo that was released to the public.
Yeah.
The Gear Live was Samsung's apology to Google, basically saying, we're just going to throw this out there in our Gear 2 body. And
can you change the old mobile syrup review to just just have it say Samsung's apology to Google?
I didn't review it because it broke. It broke after about 2 weeks. The charger, the Samsung used to have these clip-on chargers,
Yeah.
and one of the pieces of plastic broke, and it never charged again. So it's sitting here in my office, just like waiting for me to throw it away. So I think I'm going to do that after the podcast. It's going to be therapeutic.
Periscope it, but you do it too.
But then LG released a couple of new Bane, the G Watch R. Huawei's just announced a really nice rounded watch that looks to be very nice, very professional looking, and Moto 360. So the new Moto 360 I tried this week in New. Really, really sizes. They've got a women's line with some really nice bands, thinner bands that, and some really great variety. Sort of dressing up and dressing down type of bands. The guys' leather, the men's leather straps are just really well made. They have Horween leather. The lugs are now visible. Battery's bigger. Performance issues have been, overcome. Like, these are the kinds of de facto things that you have to do in your second gen. But I think at the end of the day, Android Wear is just good enough. It's got iPhone compatibility now. Like, there are things that Android Wear has gotten to that a year ago I would have said, don't even bother. Now I'm saying, look, if you have an Android phone and you're looking for a decently priced smartwatch that also looks like a watch, go with that. So it's sort of like a shrug emoji. Like, okay, sure. If you want one, get one, but maybe wait another year because you don't need one yet.
Trending towards happy face emoji.
Yeah, trending towards happy face emoji with like the one tear just like out.
Oh.
Hanging there.
Wistful emoji?
I just saw an ant in my apartment. I've had ant infestations over the past, like, every summer for the past 4 years, and I thought I'd gotten rid of all the ants, and I just saw one, so I'm like silently freaking out right now.
Hey man, it's okay.
I hate ants so much. Let me tell you the history of the pharaoh ant. The pharaoh ant is literally the hardest ant to get rid of because
befitting its name.
They're tiny, and when their colonies are threatened, they split up and assign a new queen. So instead of getting rid of them entirely, you basically just create a hydra where you chop off one head and two more appear. So you talk. I'm just going to kill this ant.
All right. And as a vegetarian and someone who thinks ants are cute, I'm kind of rooting for the ants. But okay, so everyone enjoying this podcast, we know that we love you to rate this if you can on the iTunes store, simply because it really helps with discovery. But when you give us that 5-star rating because we spit hot ant killing fire, please in your comment tell us why you would want a smartwatch in late summer of 2015 and what your current emoji status is on smartwatches in general. Because I'm still snoozing emoji, like just the Z's. Because there's like, if you want to get on my wrist, you got to put a ring on it, and that ring is a metaphor for being useful, and I don't think they are.
If you want to be my lover,
you gotta get with my friends.
So I'm actually wearing the Pebble Time Steel this morning.
Yeah,
if you're watching on the video cast, I kind of dig it. It's got a beautiful leather strap, really nicely made. But the Pebble, when compared to the Apple Watch or kind of the Moto 360 or what looks like the Gear S2, it's like the UI is like a child's toys UI, like an old Tamagotchi that you're like, you remember really fondly, but then you pick it up after 15 years and you're like, this thing has no reason to be this childish. And
also, I'm sorry, Tamagotchi, for not feeding you for 15 years.
Yeah. Is it still alive?
Yeah.
Also, killing that ant felt really good, I just have to say. But now now they're gonna kill me. They're gonna like murder me in my sleep.
Yeah, it's still on Team Ant, man. Sorry.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's hard out there for an ant.
It's hard out there for an ant.
All right. So are we gonna? Do we want to talk about Watch OS 2? Because like the big, if we want to talk about smartwatches, we should actually talk about the smartwatch that people sometimes buy.
People are buying. Yeah. So the big deal for so next week Wednesday is the Hey Siri, Give Me a Hint Apple event in San Francisco, and obviously iPhone 6s is going to be announced. 6s Plus. We know these things. We generally know what they're going to have. New processor, A9 chip, faster, more efficient. Obviously, there is
Apple TV.
Sorry.
Apple TV.
Well, let me just finish the iPhone stuff. So there's 2 gigs of RAM finally, which has been a problem for the larger iPhone. So basically, a lot of people make fun of the iPhone for only having a gig of RAM, but you shouldn't have more RAM than you need in your computer. And there's and when I say computer, I mean like your smartphone doesn't need more RAM than you shouldn't have more RAM in a smartphone than it needs. So having 4 gigs of RAM in a Note 5 is nice, but if your OS is not efficiently using the RAM, then there's no point in having it. It's just taking up power. The iPhone has always been really good at dealing with memory management. It cuts things off. It cuts off apps immediately after you press the home button. There are a few APIs that allow things to run in the background, but generally 1 gig has been okay for the latest devices. The iPhone 6 is fine because it has a lower res screen and things therefore it doesn't need to keep as much in memory, like Safari tabs, for example. But the iPhone 6 Plus with 1 gig of RAM has been a problem because it's a 1080p display and it stores a lot more in the memory and it doesn't perform as well with only 1 gig of RAM. And we've seen Apple increase it. It's released a device with 2 gigs of RAM, the iPad Air 2, with an AA chip, and it works a lot better. So when you're browsing, you don't have to constantly refresh tabs. Apps reload more quickly and with more stability, and generally things just run smoother with 2 gigs of RAM. So getting there with the iPhones is going to be a big deal. Probably more of a big deal is the new camera sensor that is expected to debut with the iPhone 6s. It's 12 megapixels, going to have a wider aperture, faster, better, blah, blah, blah. We'll see it next week. We'll know more about it then. But Force Touch is probably the most user-facing, important user-facing upgrade, as long as it's integrated well. I don't know if they'll call it Force Touch. I hope they don't call it Force Touch. So we'll see.
Well, the other supposed name is as dumb.
Right.
It's the
Joel makes a good point. The 6 Plus is not actually rendering. So everything is rendered at it's rendered at 3x, I believe, which is a slightly higher resolution than 1080p, and then it scales it down to 1080p to display it. So doing that processing also takes up more RAM. So with the iPhone 6s Plus expected to have the same 1080p resolution, it's unlikely that Apple is going to make any changes to that scheme. So 2 gigs of RAM is also going to help there. Thank you, Joel, for that. Apple TV. Yeah, I'm excited about Apple TV. Apple TV is going to be an interesting change. They're supposed to be bringing an app store to the television and releasing a touch and gesture sensitive controller along with it. And I think the potential for really cool games is there. I don't know if Apple is going to invest in the ecosystem the way that Sony and Microsoft have. They're not going to court developers. I just think developers are, well, I mean, they obviously court developers, but they're not going to seek out those exclusives because they don't need to. I mean, everybody loves making games for the iPhone and iPad because they make decent amounts of money.
Totally. And it could be a great discovery. Like, hey, our app is free on Apple TV. Go buy it on your phone. Like there are the reason why there are a ton of games in the App Store now would lead you to believe that they will show up on Apple TV. Especially if the porting is easy.
Like just think about. I open up the Windows Store or the Microsoft Store on my Xbox One, and I paid $15 for Peggle unlimited. I love Peggle. I think Peggle is a great casual game. You know, they've been making these kinds of games for years, and they translate. Some of them translate better, but there's definitely going to be games like Angry Birds for TV. You may be able to buy one and deploy across all. Game Center will allow you to sync your high scores and your leaderboards. I mean, these are kind of de facto obvious things that are going to happen. What I think is really interesting is that if the controller is gesture sensitive, as the rumors say, that's going to lead to some sort of Wii type games that allow you to use motion to control what's on the screen. A lot of those accelerometer like games that you play on the iPhone just by tilting your phone. Yeah, that's going to be very cool to see on the television.
And I would not be surprised if they even announce at some point the idea of using your iPhone or your tablet as a controller.
And they've done that already. I mean, you can do that over AirPlay now.
You can do that over AirPlay now, really?
Yeah, not a lot of games use it. But for example, one of my favorite trivia games is You Don't Know Jack. And it's a game that they debuted like 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, like 20 years. I've been playing that in high school, son. Like
20 years ago. Yeah, like we're in almost 2016. You're right. So they brought a version of You Don't Know Jack where you actually use your iPad as the screen and you can AirPlay it to a television, and then you use up to 4 iPhones as the buzzer.
That's
so you
cool.
can sit on your couch with a bunch of your friends, project it to your television, and then buzz in with your phone. And if everybody has an iPhone, it works really well. But you can also use an Android phone for that.
Why don't we do that at the office, man? Like, we should be doing that all the time.
Because we never get any work done.
We should just be jacking all day.
Yeah, I would love to jack all day. It would be my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah. And jacking as a team, I think, wow.
Well, I mean, I could jack you and you could jack me, and it would be just like a full on.
Patrick's new. I've never even jacked with him before.
No, it's. I mean, we'd have to sort of take it slow with him. Really build it up.
We wouldn't want him to feel left out, but we don't want to scare him. So, okay, this is what happens when we do a podcast on a Friday instead of a Thursday. But so the reason why I asked about Apple TV is because my birthday is coming up, and
it is. When's your birthday?
Next week.
What?
Yeah, and my mom, I don't know, a day. Oh, like the September 10th is my birthday. Sorry. And my mother has like an aneurysm every year if she can't think of something to get me, and like forces me to decide. And being a grown ass man, I don't really need anything other than love. But this year, my lovely girlfriend suggested an Apple TV because.
Is that why you asked about the US TV?
Yeah. So, the one thing that I'm really missing is a convenient way to watch stuff on my big screen that isn't on Netflix. And obviously, only having a 360 in the house, we've started to get into Apple TV to watch the last season of Mad Men because it's not on Netflix yet, and we have to do that on my laptop because I have a dumb TV, and the 360 is really dumb about what files it'll play. So I thought an Apple TV would be a great thing for my mom to buy me that I could just totally buy myself. But
I think it would be a great thing for your mom to buy you too.
She's already like, I need all the details.
Little Douglas.
What are the specs and the sizes? And I'm like, Mom, you literally just have to wait a week.
Your mom says the word specs?
I think no, yeah, she follows. I got her into Foursquare. She does stuff.
Sweet. Your mom's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's answer a couple of questions
sure.
on the side here. Joel's asking, do you think the rumors of no sapphire lens cover and a smaller battery likely to be true? Absolutely not. Apple would not release a device with a smaller battery. If anything, it would increase the thickness of the phone slightly to make it a bigger battery. But I say this knowing that Apple tries to make their devices thinner with every release. I don't think that they're going to make them thicker this year. But if, for example, they remember with the iPad 3, they increased the thickness because they needed more battery because the screen at the time was so processor heavy. So they needed to do that. I don't think it'll be thicker. I think from what I've heard, they'll be identical in every way. Sapphire lens cover on the camera, but not the display. and other niceties like
Are we at
that.
a scenario where they can? So the new MacBook Airs have really cool, like beveled battery technology, so that they could take advantage of more of the curved space within the laptop, right? So that
Yeah.
they could have like a uh, battery pancake stack. And I'm wondering, like, are we reaching a point where we could see that tech in the smartphone, so they could maybe keep it thin, or if it's curved, perchance, still take advantage of extra space there?
I don't see why they would have to, if only because there's less space for them to work. I mean, basically, the iPhone right now is most smartphones in general are just big batteries. Like,
Mm.
if you take them out, the actual motherboards are getting considerably thinner and smaller, and the chips themselves are getting thinner and smaller. If the A9 chip is built on a 14 nanometer process, which I don't think it is, but it's probably going to be built on a 20 nanometer process. I think that everything is just going to shrink a little bit more, which will give them more space for the battery. The only consideration here is that the Force Touch hardware may add a slight layer of thickness, which may affect the amount of space they have for the battery. But Apple's a smart company, and they're not going to decrease battery size without making sure that the efficiency gain from the new chips would mean that battery life would be the same or better.
Yeah, they would get it would be a problem.
And also
Um,
iOS 9, which I've been using on the iPhone 6 for a few months now, promises 1 hour of better battery life over iOS 8 just by existing. Like, they've figured out how to make the OS more efficient.
mhm.
So the same hardware with the iOS 9 is going to get a 1 hour upgrade. Those are the kinds of things that they can do in hardware and software combined.
Yeah, so Joel's dropping questions here like a bomb. So Apple TV ran iOS.
I think it does. I don't think it's. I think it's a similar thing to how iOS is just a variant of like OS X. I think that it does run
Yeah,
iOS in some way. I think
for
that
all
it's just
intents and purposes,
explicit.
they're the same thing, even if the presentation layer is different. Oh, I have not played. You don't know Jack on my Xbox.
I didn't even know they had it, but I'm definitely going to buy it right after this. Right
Um,
after I throw out the gear live, I'm going to play Xbox.
the Acer Jade Primo. Now, is that
I think he's being a troll.
okay? Because I was like, is that the phone that I said looked like an asshole yesterday?
No, that was the Acer Predator
Oh yeah, the Acer Predator looks like an
6.
asshole.
Kind of look like an asshole.
There's no. Is there a chat room?
Sheldon's asking, should BlackBerry concentrate on the enterprise and make excellent mobile devices in that space and allow these devices to bleed over into the wild organically?
Yes.
Well, I think that's basically what they did back in the early and mid 2000s, and people just happened to like them, and
Yeah.
they became a bit more mainstream. So I don't think they will ever do that again, because they can't do it again. iPhone and Android are just too dominant.
I think they're doing it now. I think they're doing it now.
We'll see. I mean, I don't think the Android-based BlackBerry devices are in any risk of selling in huge quantities.
No, but they should focus on enterprise and just let what happens happen with the devices, rather than try to be a consumer company ever again. Sheldon, chat room. So we have a process question here. Is there a chat room I could join, or do I just hit the green ask a question button at the bottom right? I don't know how any of this works, so I'm going to say keep asking questions because we see those.
I think you're doing it right.
Yeah.
I think Mike just asked the word Samsung. If you're still listening, Mike, I don't know what that means.
But the answer is no.
The answer is no. And I would like a smartwatch when it replaces my smartphone with a nice earpiece. So, here's the thing. Our friend and colleague Tom Emmerich is like the wearable guy.
He's a cyborg.
I didn't even I like. Yeah, I think that he's talked about hearables quite a lot. Hearables are a category of wearable that obviously you put in your ear. The Moto Hint was a good example of that, but there's a bunch coming out this year and next year. One of them was a Kickstarter project called Dash, and it's a pair of headphones. They're independent, so they rest separately in both of your ears, and they do a whole bunch of stuff. So it's sort of like Star Trek when you tap on the, they tap on their ear and I guess they tap on their
Wow, you just know nothing about Star Trek.
No, I know that they tap on their uniform,
Their
and then they're like,
communicator.
computer, warp speed, or they're like, Crusher, come in here. I need a blowjob.
Oh,
Right,
man,
right. Patrick Stewart.
And so the better corollary would be the movie Her, where the guy carries around essentially an track wheel iPod-y kind of smartphone with an earpiece that narrates the activity so he doesn't have to be staring at a screen all the time. Or the great Ender's Game series of books where Ender has a giant network supercommunicator in an earpiece that keeps him in the know about stuff. So yeah, that would be way better than us looking at screens all the time. But wait 200 years. Joel,
God.
I don't
So
believe you. I think you're a huge troll.
No, I believe him now because I'm looking it up, and I hadn't even heard of this. But it's right. Joel is a big Windows fan. I remember from the comments now. This runs Windows 10 Mobile. And what does it say? It adds Continuum, a feature that detects which type of Windows device you're using and configures the operating system accordingly. Right, because Windows 10 Mobile will scale to multiple screen sizes. It's funny how little information was given about this phone. But I think it's the first Windows 10 mobile device announced officially, which is kind of cool. Are you still here, Douglas, or did I make you disappear?
I'm just still disappointed that you didn't know that it was called a communicator. Also, then I'm just thinking about Ender's Game and all the the follow-up books. They're around here somewhere. Great reads.
I have my own sci-fi loves. There's a Toronto-based sci-fi writer called Robert Sawyer, who I've always just loved his books. And he has an amazing trilogy called the Hominids trilogy. And it's basically an alternate universe where they find a wormhole in Sudbury, Ontario, that leads to another universe where Neanderthals became the dominant species rather than Homo sapiens.
Sounds like true crime.
It's so good. It's so good.
Suck it, Sudbury.
It's one of those. It's one of those trilogies that you just devour in like 2 days. It's called the Neanderthal Parallax. Robert J. Sawyer, and it's amazing. So definitely go out and buy it.
Sudbury is such an ugly place that it can be the setting of astronaut trials for the moon landing and a sci-fi story. Yeah, I'm from Sault Ste. Marie. What, Sudbury? What are you going to do about it?
What was I saying? I don't even know. Now I'm just thinking about reading that book again.
Yeah. We'll all jack together, then we'll read sci-fi.
Oh my God. This is such not a safe for work podcast.
Whatever. But everyone's tuning in from work because we're doing it Friday morning instead of Thursday afternoon.
I know. I love this. I think we should pod on Friday mornings all the time. Nobody's working right now.
Good.
Okay, let's finish this off by talking about Rogers. I got a big scoop that I'm pretty proud of on the weekend, and it was all about Rogers' new Share Everything Plus plan. Basically, what happened was Rogers decided that instead of competing directly with TELUS and Bell in terms of pricing, they're going to slightly increase the prices of their low and mid-tier plans, but add the option of bundling either Show Me for 2 years, Spotify for 2 years, or Next Issue Canada for 2 years. And they changed around a bunch of their higher end plans. So instead of offering a 2 gigabyte plan, they now offer a 2.5 gig plan. Instead of offering a 3 gig plan, instead of offering a 4 gig plan, they now offer a 4.5 gig. I'm sorry, I'm all wrong. Anyway, they now have 5 gigs instead of 6. They now have 9 gigs instead of 10, and they cap off at 15 instead of 30. Long story short, you're basically paying a little bit more, except in the high end. So the 9 gig plan is only a couple dollars more than the 6 gig plan used to be, and you get these great features. I'm a big fan of this, actually. I'm not gonna lie. I think that they're doing the right thing here. They need more money. People are they're enjoying these value adds. They, you know, I get tired of people saying that they're paying too much for their mobile phone service in Canada.
I'm paying too much for my mobile phone service in Canada.
We have the best networks in the world. The best networks in the world.
Paying too much.
Okay, fair.
Thank you for charging me more for less data and giving me a bunch of stuff that I don't want. If no one's competing on price, then they're not competing, and it's frustrating.
Well, they're adding new things. I'm not. Look, I know that I come across as an apologist for the big three, and I agree that we pay too much, but I also think that we get so much in terms of service. And I'm not talking about customer service. Rogers and Bell still need to improve their customer service. TELUS is getting better. But in terms of the networks, and I'm really talking about just the fact that I can get 100 megabit LTE basically anywhere I go in the country is incredible. And whenever I go to the US, and I travel to the US all the time, even on AT&T, even on the country's second biggest network, sucks. It just the service sucks. And every time somebody complains about the Canadian networks being too expensive, I say you get the exact same amount in the US and you get way worse service.
Well, they're also servicing 1/10 the population in the United States.
That doesn't matter. No. That's not fair, because we're talking about areas that have the same density. So I'm talking about Vancouver, I'm talking about Toronto, I'm talking about Montreal. We have the same density. And
so then if they have to charge us a little bit more to keep their network so great, why did they lower the data caps?
The Americans, they're changing the data caps. You can still buy. It's about gigabytes per dollar essentially. How much are they paying you? Oh, they're paying me quite a lot actually. So what was I saying? And recently, Public Mobile actually did a soft launch. So they have a new system now where you bring your own device, and you can sign up for text only, voice only, or data only, and then you get discounts based on how many of those three that you subscribe to. But they don't sell phones, and as a result, they get you're basically not paying for the overhead.
Mm-hmm. Similar to what we discussed with Wind last week, right?
It's a similar thing to Wind last week. And what's interesting about the Rogers thing and the public plans is that Rogers is moving more towards a financing system than they ever have. And I think Bell and TELUS will likely follow suit. So what happens is if you pay more for your phone up front, you pay less per month on your plan. So they're saying if you want to spend, $100 and get $500 in subsidy on a $600 phone, you can spend more on your monthly plan. But if you want to spend $300 up front on a $600 phone, then you can get $10 a month off and save $240 over 2 years. So I mean, the math is still confusing, but at the end of the day, spending more for your phone up front nets you a larger discount over time. And obviously, this is an interest-free financing system, so it doesn't really affect you. If you have the money to spend up front, I would obviously recommend doing that. But Public's offerings are not quite as generous as I would have hoped in terms of data, but they're still quite cheap if you want quite cheap. They're relatively cheaper compared to the big three. Comments, suggestions?
I just hit that wall where not having coffee 2 hours ago is actually killing me now.
Okay.
And I just get so depressed, man. I get depressed when it's just like, oh, bring out your dead. Time to pay more money.
So you don't consider the mobile phone in your pocket the lifeblood of what you do? Like,
no, I consider this hat to be the lifeblood of what I do.
I don't understand when people get so worked up about something that they rely on.
Okay, so here's why. It's because we rely on it, and the price increases and the changes seem completely arbitrary. and are not reinforced by an experience of the service. And regardless of whether or not that's the actual cost required to make this ship run, we never see competition on price, right? And that's because there's three companies that dictate what price is going to be and choose instead to compete on services, which costs them nothing amortized over their large conglomerate networks, right? So I would love to see just someone say, hey, you know what? This is what we can give you for this price. Don't worry about anything else. And I would have the option to choose between Share Plus, Service Plus, Super Duper Edition, and just like, hey, this thing that I need every day, which I crazy rely on, costs this much, and it won't change until it needs to.
Well, they're not changing. Okay, so first of all, they're not going to arbitrarily increase the cost of your plan. So that's not allowed. They can't do it under the Wireless Code of Conduct. So that's not even an argument. Second of all, I get, and my biggest issue is the price discrepancies between provinces. That is my biggest issue. I am fine. I am okay paying as much as I do because I rely on my service as much as I do. Okay, maybe I have a different opinion, and I get people. They want reliable service for cheap, and I totally understand that, and I want them to have it. I want Win Mobile to become the fourth carrier in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia that they need to be. And I think that it's ridiculous that Rogers, Bell, and Telus compete in areas that they only have competition, like Quebec, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. That is an acknowledged point, and I will not cede that. I totally understand that. But what I'm saying is that when it comes to value, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about value to me personally, right? There are a few things that I'm willing to pay for in this life. I'm willing to pay for good cell service, good coffee, and good food. And I think that, instead of arguing that everything should be lower, we need to understand that what we're getting is considerably higher quality than many countries in the world.
Has the cost of your food increased by 50 to 75% in the last 6 years?
No, but the cost of my cell phone plan hasn't increased by 50 to 70% in the last 6 years.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
Not 50%? 75 is just being crazy, but not 50% in like the last, really? So you're paying 120 plus 6 years ago?
I was paying 90 6 years ago.
So literally it increased by 50%.
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
But
and
I'm getting
has your mobile experience changed in any significant way since, like, I don't know, 2010? And I'm not saying what you can do on a mobile. I'm saying your experience of mobile service changed in any significant way since like 2010 or whenever Wi-Fi became commonplace on phones. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. LTE, for one thing. The ability to basically run an entire business on your phone, having enough of a pipe to do that. The ability to make a call. When I was paying $90 4 years ago, I could only call within my province for 200 minutes a month. So, yeah, I mean, having the ability to call across Canada and the US has also considerably increased my productivity. Plus the fact that I have triple the amount of data. I mean, like I'm not going to sit here and say that it sucks that it doesn't suck that I'm paying more, but I also am getting more for what I paid, and I'm willing to pay it. Period.
I would just like the option. I just want the option to go about it a different way. And Mike's talking about grandfathered plans.
Yeah, and they're great. And they're
the extent to which, and I've held on to that friggin' plan for like 4 years. And it just reached a point where it was not sustainable to be on that grandfathered plan anymore, because they make it very, very difficult for you to stay on a grandfathered plan because they will not honor changes to the wireless code of conduct unless you're on a new plan. So they, so the
No, that's true, but
yeah, it is.
the wireless code of conduct now applies to everybody. So that's actually even though you're on a grandfather plan, technically everybody in Canada is now under the protection of the wireless code of conduct as of June 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, I know.
So,
They Indiana Jones slid under the wire and got me on that. So, but yeah, it's just I just want, and I get that you have specific things that you're willing to pay a fair amount of money for high quality, and I get that. I'm exactly the same way. I'd rather pay for reasonable amounts for great experiences than the bargain bin experience. I just don't think that the relationship that I have with these companies are similar to the relationship I have with the other quality products that I get to buy.
what relationships do you have with other companies?
The one where if every 6 months it's a totally different. Like do you ever feel like you're getting screwed by your coffee?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally if they burn the roast, but like it's a consistent thing, right? Coffee's also increased in price a lot. I used to pay $12 a pound for a good roast like 5 or 6 years ago. Now I pay $20 for 3/4 of a pound, but I'm okay with that because I'm willing to go without other things in order to get these things that I really care about. I'm willing to get no name brand milk or eggs or whatever. I mean,
T-shirts.
like I trust that those industries, but I mean at the same time I get it because those industries are regulated. Those industries have they have lobbyists, but they're also regulated. So I know that if I'm buying eggs in Ontario or milk in Ontario, that even though there's a hugely protectionist group of people that want to charge tariffs to companies, importing eggs and milk from other countries. Maybe those are bad examples, but
well, just go by to coffee.
least,
there are 1,000 different places to buy coffee, not only by the cup, but even by the bag in the city of Toronto.
Okay, but fine. But if you get a coffee from a Coffee Time or some McDonald's, like you're paying less for the coffee, and that's fine if you're okay with that. I don't like that coffee. I could go to a cheaper mobile service provider. It's there. I could do it. I could go to Wind. I could, but I don't want to. And we have this argument every week. It means more to me to spend 4 times what Wind charges because that extra money means that my life, I don't have to think about my mobile phone plan.
Totally. No, and I get that. But what I'm saying is I'm caught up in your decision-making process or the decision-making process that you're okay with because my only other alternative is Wind. There is an uncanny valley between your desire for like, this means so much to me, I want the best, and you're going to get what you're going to get. And that's because there's no, like, the healthiest industries of capitalism are ones in which there is a sliding scale of options at certain price points for services, right? Not, well, it's not going to work outside of the city and you probably need to be on Wi-Fi all the time. And you're paying $120 to $150 a month just to use a modern phone. Well, like there is a space for something in between that. And right now, with only 3 companies able to provide that, they just don't get it because they don't have to. Because they can tack on another service and up the price or lower the data per price. And they don't have to worry about someone else coming in and saying, well, that's cool. If people want that, they can get that, but we're gonna flip the script and do it this way. And that's what's frustrating, is that there's no opportunity for someone else to come in and do these things. But we've gone through to a great extent to explain the logistics of why that is the case, regulatory, technical, and all that. But it doesn't make me like them doing that because they can.
You don't have to like them, but I think that you are also, I think most Canadians go into the argument framing it as they're getting ripped off instead of appreciating how much better their plans are or their service is. If you look at it from the perspective of if you look at it from the okay, here's what I do. I often try to get the cheapest roaming plan or cheapest local data SIM when I go to the US.
Mm-hmm.
And Roam Mobility tethers on T-Mobile. T-Mobile's okay in some parts of the country, but even Roam Mobility says if you go out of the downtown area of basically any large city, you're going to be on edge, and you have to acknowledge that, and that's okay. You can acknowledge that. In Canada, you can basically go into any city in the country and get decent LTE service now on any of the big three, but you're also not able to spend only $4 a day on that for that option. I totally agree with you that there needs to be that middle ground. That uncanny valley is far too stark in most provinces. I 100% agree with you there. I'm talking about it from a personal value perspective. That
Totally.
It makes sense for me to spend this much. And it makes sense for people. If you go on a streetcar, people are using their phone. If you go to a bank, people are using their phone. If you go anywhere in the country, people are using their phone, and it is quickly becoming an essential service.
No, I understand that. I completely agree. Because, like, man, I buy Apple products. I pay more for quality of design beyond function. It's just, but if I wasn't one of those people, I could buy so many other different types of laptops, and this isn't just that scenario, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating being a type of consumer that I don't want to be because I don't have any other choice.
I think we have to end there. It's almost at an hour and a half, and once we hit that 1 hour, that 90-minute mark, explodes. You turn into a pumpkin, and GarageBand decides to kick us out. But I think that's actually a good place to end this week, because next week we'll inevitably be talking about the prices of the new iPhones, and that will lead us into this argument again, right? Like, because Joel makes a really good point. There are so many great options for mid-range handsets. Why are there no great options for mid-range price plans? So I think, I am willing to admit that I'm wrong. I also have an extremely biased look at this because this is what I do. I could not do my job without the high-speed LTE.
You're not wrong, man. You're not wrong. I totally get your value
I know I'm not
proposition.
wrong, but I also have a very, very, very skewed perspective on this industry. I by necessity, you and I have a very skewed perspective, and I think that I have to acknowledge that. Otherwise, there's the people accusing me of being biased. They're absolutely right, but I'm biased because I have to be, because that perspective is enforced by what I do every day.
It's a function of your job. We are the 1%.
Let's continue this conversation next week. We'll have new iPhones to talk about. We'll have new iPads to talk about. We'll have a new Apple TV to talk about, and we'll have a lot more in terms of these really interesting conversations. Thank you, everybody, for tuned in live. Joel Rushworth for your great questions. Mike Cottrell for your great questions. Alex Kinsella for your troll questions. We appreciate everybody who tunes in every week. And if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any comments, as Douglas said while I was killing the ant, please leave a comment on iTunes with a rating. We love hearing back from you. That's it for this week. We will see you on the next SyrupCast. Take care.